Imagine a top lawyer, feared in the courtroom, chasing nothing but power. But one night, alone in his office, he sees a shadow that whispers words he can't forget. Leave the truth buried. You belong to us. Haunted by visions, he discovers an ancient document proving a mosque's rightful land. As darkness follows him, his own pride collapses. And in the horror, he kneels, not before a judge, but before the one he never knew. How does a man raised to worship law end up submitting to God? Watch till the end. This is a journey of fear, mystery, and a heart finally finding the light of Islam. The final case, a lawyer's journey to light. The heavy rain lashed against the tall windows of the office on the 23rd floor, turning the night into a restless rhythm of water and wind. Thomas Reed, partner at Ellis and Blackwell LLP, sat hunched over a folder that had haunted him for weeks. The Ghazali Estate versus City of New York. On paper, it was an inheritance dispute tangled with zoning violations. But the deeper he dug, the more it felt like something ancient, something that whispered through the cracks of the modern world. Thomas was not a man prone to superstition. His life was built on facts, evidence, and the law. The courtroom had always felt like a cathedral to him, where the ritual of justice replaced faith. But this case refused to stay within those boundaries. At night, he dreamed of corridors without end, old script on crumbling walls, and shadows that moved even when he was still. It had started innocently. The Ghazali family, recent immigrants, claimed their great-grandfather had endowed land for a mosque and charitable trust decades ago. The city wanted to seize it for development, and Thomas, assigned as external counsel, was tasked to prove the endowment had never existed. Easy enough, he had thought, until he opened the first sealed envelope. Inside, he found a letter in yellowed parchment, scrawled in Arabic, with faint English translation. Whoever conceals what God has made clear, his own soul shall be concealed from the light. For the first time in his career, Thomas felt something close to dread. In the days that followed, his health began to fail. Sleepless nights led to pale mornings. The walls of his apartment seemed to close in on him, and strange sounds echoed at dawn. Footsteps in the hallway, whispering voices that faded before he could catch the words. His assistant Emily, worried by his gaunt look, suggested he see a doctor. He nodded but never went. Instead, Thomas dug deeper. He visited the Ghazali family's old building in Queens, an aging brownstone clinging to life among shiny glass towers. There, he met Layla Ghazali, a woman of quiet strength and grief-tinged resolve. Her grandfather, she said, had devoted his life to building a mosque and shelter for the poor. Records had vanished. The land title, once safe, had been lost in the chaos of immigration and a fire. Why keep fighting? Thomas asked, exhaustion cracking his voice. Because the truth belongs to God, Layla replied softly, as if quoting. Thomas almost laughed, but something stopped him. Her words echoed in the hollows of his chest, a place he had long ignored. Late one night, Thomas sat in his office, rereading the same document for the 100th time. The wind outside keened like a lament. The overhead lights flickered. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. And then, an impossible thing. In the reflection of the window, he saw himself, but behind him stood a figure, tall and robed, face obscured. Heart-pounding, he spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. Yet on the table, an old file lay open, one he had not touched. The page showed a property deed dated 1934, signed in elegant Arabic script, Waqf, Islamic endowment. Proof. His hand trembled. Sweat dripped onto the page. But as he reached to touch it, the paper darkened, the words melting into black stains. A whisper curled through the room. The truth is not for sale. Shaken, Thomas fled the building into the wet midnight streets. The city lights blurred through the rain, and every shadow seemed alive. He reached St. Mark's Cemetery, for reasons he could not explain, drawn by an invisible hand. Among the ancient stones, he found a grave bearing the name Ibrahim Ghazali. The inscription below read, Servant of the Merciful, let the truth set you free. Kneeling before the grave, Thomas felt something break inside him. Pride, certainty, perhaps even disbelief. His breath came in ragged sobs. What is the truth? He thought. The wind rose, carrying the scent of damp earth and something older, wilder beyond words. And for the first time in decades, Thomas whispered, not to a judge or a jury, but to something unseen. Show me. The following days felt unreal. Thomas researched Waqf, Islamic law, and the Qur'an. What started as legal study became something deeper. He read verses that spoke of mercy, justice, and the brevity of this life. Yet the darkness did not lift. At night, the dreams returned. A vast desert, ruins half buried in sand, and a voice reciting words in Arabic he could not understand. Shadows crept across the dunes, sometimes forming shapes of men and beasts. In the courtroom, Thomas tried to ignore the weight in his chest. But every argument felt hollow. Every lie, once so easy, now turned to ashes on his tongue. One evening, driven by desperation, he visited the Islamic Center in Brooklyn. Inside, a quiet library smelled of books and worn carpet. There, an old man named Yusuf sat, reading. Researching a case, Thomas began, voice hoarse. Yusuf looked up, smiled gently. Sometimes what we find is more than we seek. Thomas confessed everything. The visions, the fear, the strange pull towards something he couldn't name. Yusuf listened in silence, then spoke. Perhaps it is your soul calling you. The Quran says, indeed, those who were blind in this life will be blind in the hereafter. Maybe you are being shown what you chose not to see. That night, Thomas lay awake, rain tapping the window. He opened the Quran he had borrowed. His eyes fell on a verse. God guides whom he wills, and leaves astray whom he wills, but he is never unjust. Tears slipped down his face, surprising him. The fear that had stalked him changed, softened into something like longing. He felt close to something real, frighteningly real. But horror had one last lesson. A week before the final hearing, Thomas stayed late to prepare. Midnight wrapped the office in silence. The city skyline blinked beyond the glass. Then, slowly the lights dimmed. The temperature dropped. The shadows lengthened. He saw them. Figures, half-formed, emerging from corners, faces hidden, whispering words he could almost catch. His skin prickled with primal terror. His breath fogged before him. One voice rose above the rest, dark and commanding. Leave the truth buried. You belong to us. Thomas tried to stand. His legs failed. His heart pounded against bone, frantic. But in the depth of fear, a memory sparked. Yusuf's words, God is nearer to you than your jugular vein. With shaking lips, he whispered, God, help me. The shadows recoiled. The cold lifted. The room brightened. He found himself on the floor, alone, tears on his face, breath ragged. And in that moment, Thomas knew he could no longer serve falsehood. The next morning, Thomas filed a motion withdrawing from the city's case, citing conflict of conscience. His partners raged, threatening ruin, but he felt strangely calm. The Ghazali family would finally present evidence without his obstruction. Layla met him outside the courthouse. Her eyes, once wary, now held warmth. Why, she asked. I don't know everything yet, Thomas confessed, but I know I can't fight what I believe to be true. Days turned to weeks. Thomas kept studying Islam, drawn not by force, but by the quiet harmony of faith and reason. The nightmares faded, replaced by dreams of light over water, of prayer in quiet dawn. Then came the day he could not deny what was in his heart. In Yusuf's presence, at the Islamic Center, Thomas spoke words that felt both ancient and newly born. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasul Allah. I testify there is no God but Allah, and I testify Muhammad is his messenger. Peace, unexpected and profound, settled over him like a warm mantle. Thomas Reed became Tariq, a new name for a new life. His journey was far from over. Colleagues turned cold, family questioned him, and old habits wrestled with new faith. Yet in prayer, he found stillness. In charity, purpose. In the Quran, answers, and better still, better questions. The horror he had feared became a door. Through it, he saw the shadow of his soul and the light that lay beyond. Years later, he would stand beside Layla at the newly rebuilt Ghazali Mosque, its minaret rising against the sky. The land, finally recognized as Waqf, belonged not to wealth or power, but to God and the community. At dusk, as the call to prayer floated over the city, Tariq bowed his head. Once, he had worshipped law and ambition. Now, he worshipped the one beyond time and place. In the soft glow of sunset, he whispered a prayer of gratitude, for horror that became guidance, mystery that became faith, and for a truth he could no longer deny. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Your words inspire us to create more stories like this. Join us on Deen in Minute for more emotional, mysterious Islamic stories that awaken the soul.